right. I want to welcome Brad to the podcast, the CEO of a $150 million automotive enthusiast's dream, the Motor Enclave in Tampa. So you have an interesting background, starting in entertainment law for 12 years, moving over to the healthcare industry for a while, and then making the next logical step, which was go in automotive and develop a $75 million project before doing this current project. So you got a lot going on. And I just have a few questions about, entertainment, healthcare, automotive. Give us the backstory on all that.
Why they all relate to each other or don't relate to each other?
Exactly.
Well, I always say, I kind of had an unintended career path, but there's a commonality amongst all the things I've done, which is one is building blocks. Each job is built on the other and not been strategic by any chance, just really about networking and opportunity and sort of moving through life and navigating in ways to figure out what I really wanted to do. It takes a long time for some people. And each of those industries, what I figured out in business is it doesn't really matter the industry. If you've got the core foundational skills of really marketing and sales, I mean, honestly, I tell people like I could probably sell anything, maybe not be successful at everything, but it's the same principles. And no matter if it's automotive or healthcare or tech or, whatever, entertainment, media, it's really the same. It's just a question of how you promote that product. And the real thing is just, are you willing to grind it out? I always say, like, I didn't go to any schools anybody heard of. I'm not smarter than the next guy.
Ithaca, right? Went to Ithaca.
I never one thing. I generally work harder than most people.
And Southwestern, right?
Yeah. Ithaca College in New York and Southwestern School of Law in Los Angeles.
Nice.
So yeah, it's just about the grind. And when people come to me with all these, ideas, and then I find out that their main motivation is how do I work from 9 to 5? I say, well, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur because that's the wrong thing to say.
That's not the right thing. So you moved into M1 Concourse, which was similar project, maybe a little smaller, I know, from a standpoint of the size of the financials of it. But what brought you from where you were into that? Like, because that's sort of where you're at now. So what was the pivotal shift there that was like, I need to get into this, or this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to work with a few partners on a business in healthcare tech. Grew it into a really nice business and sold the business 2008. A lot of times luck is a good part of life. So timing was very lucky because we sold it on June 4th of 2008.
Oh, wow.
Whole world fell apart a few weeks later.
Sure.
I did stay working for a public company for 5 years after the deal, which was, pretty good for the first 3 years and then pretty bad for the last 2 years because it just became very bureaucratic. And I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, but I generally after I got married and had kids, I didn't want to take a lot of risk.
Yeah.
So after, was fortunate to cash out a business and have some discretionary income, said, I really don't want to work for another person anymore. I believe I've got the skill set to do it on my own. And I went through a exercise to really sort of, do I want to be retired or do I want to do something that's fun and interesting? And I'm not really the retirement type. I can't even go. I go on vacation. I'm done after a day. I'm like, I can't sit. I can't sit in a lounge chair. I gotta go do something.
Gotta get busy again.
So I knew that I wanted to do something with cars. I grew up with my dad was a car guy and hot rodder and building cars in our garage as a kid, and always really loved cars. And lived in LA for a long time, so I hung out in the car scene there. I worked in the music industry, so I was exposed to the whole lowrider scene and things like that. And I lived in back in Michigan, and I found myself every night of the week really putting my kids in my car. Whether I had a 51 Pontiac and I have a couple other old cars, and drive to get ice cream and go home. You know where to go.
Yeah.
And then you be at the ice cream shop, and there's 50 other guys that are saying, "I wish we had a place to go."
Yeah.
And also hear about my parents talking about their sort of 20s and 30s, where in Metro Detroit and all over the country, you had these drive-ins, you had car hops, you had A&W root beer type places.
Some of that all the time.
Yeah. So they used to go hang out, park, and just chill.
Yeah.
And that culture just had gone away. And I said, how do I create that destination for car enthusiasts, to have a place to go? And then a long journey over a year, sort of flying around the world, looking at different projects and really figuring out that most businesses in the hobby or passion space are financial losers. Usually it's just a rich guy or gal who says, I'm going to build the greatest golf course. And there's probably thousands of other people like me. And in the end, there's really not.
Not many.
There's a lot of golfers, but there's not a lot of golfers that want to pay $1 million
Yeah.
membership fee. There's a lot of race, people that love to race a car, but if you go to a racetrack at any given day, most people have their life savings in their car.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of research.
Not cheap.
My prior business was pretty data driven. And I really applied data to identify, the right location, the right, sort of business metrics. And, in the Michigan project, it took a long time because I couldn't find property that was close enough to where people lived, and I didn't want to be too far out. And, it's kind of the stars aligned with General Motors going bankrupt, and I bought a GM factory out of the bankruptcy in a really great location. But everyone told me it was the worst idea they ever heard. I mean, I remember just meeting after meeting, people looking at me like, it's the coolest idea, but there's no way you'll pull it off. And someone would have already done it. I mean, Roger Penske, like when guys like that would say, like, if this was a good idea, we would have done it ourselves. So, but I kind of got motivated by the naysayers and kept my head down, and the more people that talked about it couldn't be done, I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. So it took a lot of unreasonable risk probably, looking back.
Yeah.
But every day was fun. And I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. And it became sort of a hybrid of, figuring out how to make money in a business that no one had made money in, learning everything I could about development, which I'd never done.
Yeah.
Real estate and politics. And, it was very challenging. Pontiac, Michigan was a very depressed area. No one had invested in 40 years in Pontiac. And I was the first guy to really spend any real money in a pretty depressed town. But, what I found out and what I applied to everything I do is, if you're authentic and you honor, your word is your bond.
Yeah.
I got the entire community rally, around me when normally when a developer comes in, they basically want to just pillage and steal from the community or get things for free or get incentives. And it's all financially driven. And I was like, how do we rebuild schools? How do we create after school programs? How do we, revitalize the city? How do we, if my project can be a catalyst to decrease crime, and all those things have happened, and they weren't by design as part of the business model, but as I integrated myself into the community there, that kind of became the motivating factor. And in Tampa, it's
isn't the best fuel when someone tells you can't do something, won't work?
Yeah,
you're like,
that's the problem. Now everyone, I
I
get calls every day like, do you want to do this? Like, never been done. I'm like, okay, it sounds great. And I'm like, this is a really bad idea. It's probably the third time. I always say, like, although I know I can do another three, another one or a third or fourth one, the risk goes incrementally up because you can't really.
Like, Brad, you can't do that. It won't work.
Yeah,
like,
it's hard.
I'll show you.
It's hard. I mean, well, it's very common. Like, I know a lot of people that after they sell their business, people think you can just recreate. Guys sell their companies $50 million. Let's do another one. And I always say, like, lightning doesn't strike twice. In my case, I've been fortunate that we've had 2 successes of the same type of project, but that's kind of a fear factor.
To get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a never ending.
It's not just going to happen easier because you did it the first time, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
well, I thought it would. Florida was 100 times worse. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. 1,000 times worse.
Well, yeah. So I really want to know, and I liked a few things you said there, right? Sometimes motivates you. Same for me. I think the commonality of other people we've talked with are, I don't know if this can be done, and the true entrepreneur is going to be like, no, like, I'm going to figure it out, because it's like just work ethic, and you'll figure it out. You'll make it work. You'll develop the connections. You'll grind it out if you need to. And
I've always been. I just told my son this. You got to be the first one in and the last one out every day, and you may not like it, but that's what's going to either get you noticed for the wrong reasons, or make you better than the rest of the people. And when you're the last man standing,
right,
you have opportunity. I mean, numerous jobs in my career, I was literally the only man there at the right time. And they're like, you're the only guy left to do the work, do it. And the next thing you know, you get elevated.
Right.
So,
right. And it's funny in, like the 9 to 5 space where people will do that. It's like they hate their lives. In the entrepreneurial space, when you're building something because you have a passion and a real impact you're making, like you said, you brought revitalization to communities, you made an impact, you created something that was your own, that you felt was necessary. You wanted to create this community. It doesn't really negatively affect you in that way, or you're actually positively energized. Like, I worked all these hours.
Yeah.
It's get that reward where when I was doing 9 to 5 type work, but working, well past 5 till 10 o'clock at night, I was like, this sucks. It was good for a time, and I'm like, there's no fulfillment. Right.
Yeah.
So you've been able to be a leader across multiple organizations between what you did in entertainment, what you did as chief operating officer, and then CEO during that merger, which I'd love to hear more about. And then now, right? You're a founder, CEO of this organization, and you're leading development and growth. You've led through change and the merger and acquisition and doing merging through change. Like that is always the hard time, right? It's like something that's new. It's like, okay, there's not, you're setting the expectations, but through change, people already were sort of predetermined. This is how life is, and now it's changing. What is that? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how navigating through that, some of the lessons you learned, some of the maybe the struggles you had, but things that now you are like, okay, I'll do things differently if I did it again, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think across all those experiences and building companies and selling a company and I sold them one, the commonality is building a good culture and team. It's very hard. Uh, I thought I've had a great track record, and it's continues to be a challenge. As we move forward as a society, it becomes harder and harder to get people that can, you can get lots of people. The question is, can you get people to buy into your mission and want to grind it out like you?
yeah,
And the younger people that you hire, the more they want instant gratification and they want a title and a corner office and a this and that. And it just doesn't happen that way. I mean, I've been at it for 30 something years, and I still don't have the corner office, although I'm moving in the corner office next week. But it's not a corner office because it's not like I care about that, honestly.
yeah. But you're working in the lobby just now. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
gonna work wherever it takes, right?
trust me, I've been working out of an RV for the last 2 years, a corner, literally a corner of a warehouse.
You're gonna work wherever it
outside.
takes.
Yeah, I mean, titles don't matter, and where I work doesn't matter, and whether I had a cell phone allowance doesn't matter. I've been when I was younger, I thought those things mattered. But
Yeah.
what matters is can you rally a team behind you? Because while I do work 24/7, these projects won't happen without a good team, and it's harder and harder every day to you know get people to not just buy into your vision, but understand sort of the long-term opportunity,
Yeah.
especially as an entrepreneur, like as a private business, that doesn't intend to go public or anything. It's hard to like create, incentive and compensation plans that are aligned with your interests. They've sort of got to buy into, trust you that over time you do what you say you're going to do. And that's where I've been successful. Like, you can't do startup businesses and say, here, everyone, you all get 5% of the business. I'm raising capital from investors. I can't give it all away because my investors have
Right.
chunks.
Yeah.
But the team has to be like on good faith, like Brad's a good guy and Brad's gonna increment. I always say deliver incrementally on your commitments,
Yeah.
and people over time will become very loyal. You know, I might not guarantee you a bonus, but if you do what you say you're going to do, and you build on that, and there's opportunity to share in the wealth, that's what I do. When my partners and I sold our business in 2008, we didn't have to do it, but we wrote massive checks to the entire team. We had 100
Yeah.
and something employees. And did it do anything other than do the right thing? No. Like,
Yeah.
some of those people left. The company actually, after merging with the public or getting acquired by a public company and then rolled into a bunch of other things. I mean, the company doesn't exist today. Most M&A deals, when the founders leave, the whole thing crashes and burns. That's why, I tell people all the time, like when they're selling a business, like just make sure you got enough money when you sell it, because the odds are
Yeah.
against you for longevity of what you created. And that
Yeah.
culture will just dissolve when the founder leaves.
Yeah, the culture is a big deal. And you mentioned that, the culture and the trust and building that behind you. And I've heard that from a number of other people we talk to, people who have built large businesses, small businesses, that culture, especially with people, right? Because people make it all go around. And one of the things that, inspired me and I appreciated about you, not only because you've done projects where like, how do we make the community better? That helps everybody.
Mhm.
But you also do things like that, like you mentioned, but then even the end user and not even your direct client, right? You have this big cars and coffee coming up. And I remember when we first met, you were saying, hey, when I was young, it was nice to go to a cars and coffee with my dad and see these cars. And I believe you said you were, just for normal folk,
Yeah.
your normal blue collar people are over there. And so you're like, hey, how do we make that accessible? This really nice palatial,
Yeah.
luxurious place, but also open it up to everybody. And so that's what you're doing on the weekend.
Yeah. I mean, we have this debate with people every day. I got 300 owners to please. And they're like, why are you going to let thousands and thousands of people in here and trample the place? And we should just charge. Then we could have a really controlled environment. The first show in January was 3,000 cars probably
Yeah,
and whatever.
it was crazy. It was
And,
awesome.
it's probably going to be pretty large on this weekend, but, you know, I always say, like, I want the full continuum of opportunity. I want the guy that can't afford to come at all come for free. Not only come for free, I'll give you a donut and coffee that I'll pay for. You can buy a t-shirt or a hat for $10 or $20.
Yeah.
You can come to driving school for $300, $500. You can do a, corporate event for tens of thousands of dollars. You can buy a garage for hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's
Yeah.
really something for everybody. And what's great about the car scene, as you know, is no one, even if a guy's driving a Bugatti and another guy next to him is driving a, FJ Toyota, they have something in common and they talk about it. They don't,
Yeah.
at that car show we had in January, we literally, and I do this by design because people are like, oh, we should put all the Lambos here and all the Ferraris here
Yeah,
and put
yeah.
the VIP parking. If you saw what happened in that show, like the guy with the beater rat rod literally next to an F40.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing else like it in the world. Like,
Yeah.
and we had that, Shmee, the social media guy was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. He was running
And
around.
he was like, this is the craziest show I've ever seen. I've never seen a show. And he said it was curated. I go, it's uncurated. Literally, my philosophy is park everybody. And we can't tell you that's not a show car. This time we're actually going to segregate spectator cars.
Yeah. Yeah.
The family shows up in a Suburban with, nine people in it. That's not a show car.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say. But if the car's a beater and, that might be that guy's pride and joy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge you. A lot of places you go, they're like, oh,
Yeah. No.
shitty cars over here, good cars over here. And that's what makes it so amazing because
Yeah.
these people all have something in common and they don't talk about their money. They talk about the same thing in our community.
Yeah.
It's, generally it's a wide spectrum. It's fairly affluent customers in terms of our garage owners, but we got some garages that are owned by 4 or 5 buddies, and this is their life savings. And they tell me, like, I've never felt so comfortable amongst other people that have a lot more money than me.
Yeah.
There's a perception that if you drive a Ferrari that you're a jerk.
Right.
Actually, most of my customers are the opposite. They actually buy the garage in our community because they like the privacy. They never take the Ferrari off property. They never owned a Ferrari before because it's too embarrassed to own it around town. They get the garage, they enjoy it, and they're not talking about their money. They're talking about their aspirations, their dreams. They always, it's a measure of success or quality or
good quality people. I found that in the car community, the racing community, across different areas of automotive enthusiasts, that everyone has that common thread, like you said. And what I love to see is like when a kid's like, "Oh my god, that car's so cool," and then you say, "Go sit in it."
Yeah.
And then they're like, "What? Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go sit in a 720?" Like, yeah, go sit in it. And then they're like, "Turn it on."
Yeah.
Rev the engine. The kid's like,
I always do
mind
that.
blown, right?
Yeah,
You've done that.
I always do it. And people are like, why'd you, I can't believe you let someone, I'm like, literally, I was always amazed.
A core memory.
I was that guy. I was that kid, but I've been exposed to a lot of cool cars in my life and career, but some people, like, I've met people in some of these shows, like their dream is not to own a Ferrari. Their dream is to sit in a Ferrari. And I'm like,
yeah.
This guy's dream is just to sit in the car. Like, if you can't make that happen, if you're not willing to open your door to put someone in your car, I always do. Every kid.
I love that. And also you never know, right? So having that exposure in general for somebody who's young, or it doesn't really matter who age wise, but especially for the young kids to be like, oh, these people are nice. Like they can see what aspirational things around them. Could be money, it could be cars, it could be anything. It's just like, oh, there's more available to me. This community is open. Well, maybe, who knows? They find a friend or a relationship or a mentor through that might help them achieve that goal.
And also motivate them. I mean, there's a kid named Jackson who comes to every event. I let him sit in the cars. I put him in a Pagani last time, and I invited him to the Grand Prix in our suite with his family because he's a cool kid. He's doing some little things on social media, but he's so excited. And he just was me. He reminds me of me. And, I always had a car on my wall as the motivating factor.
Yeah, me too.
I just have that picture and I'm gonna figure out how to get that car,
Still do.
First it was like not very sexy stuff. And I look back and go, why did I want a Buick Skylark or Sunfire convertible, Pontiac Sunfire convertible? That was like my dream car in high school. And then my parents got me a Toyota Supra because my grandmother was very generous and bought each of her grandkids a nice car.
Nice.
And I'm like, I want a Pontiac Sunfire, but I got a Supra. And, that kind of, when I started,
what a deal.
Yeah. But I wanted a Testarossa. I had a Testarossa on my wall my whole life. And I'm fortunate to not own that car, but I look at that car and I look at Jackson and I go, if that kid can put the picture of the GT3 RS that I just took his picture on the wall and motivate him through his life to get that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the dream.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I had, I wanted for whatever reason, an Eclipse.
Yeah.
I didn't get that. I got my grandfather's Impala that I beat on for a while.
Mitsubishi Eclipse was a cool car.
Yeah, it was a cool car, right? I was like, oh, this is what I want. It's awesome.
That's like all those cars in the 80s right now are the hottest things going.
Yeah. They are. It's all those cars are coming back as far as, I think it's sentimental, obviously. Like you look back, you're like, oh man, I always wanted that car. Couldn't get it. Now I can.
It's actually, I've learned, over the years that the car collecting market literally tracks, sort of 55 years old. When a person turns 55, they want what they couldn't get in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So right now it's, I'm 53. I want what I couldn't have in high school, which, is Toyota Supras, RX-7s, 3000 GT, whatever.
What's like the ultimate? What's like the pinnacle? What's like the one car? I mean, obviously you can get it, but what's like if you had to pick one? Like I can only get
from
one.
From the 80s or from any time?
From the 80s.
Oh, from the 80s? I'm a huge Supra guy because I had a Supra. So I bought my exact high school car, not the exact one, but like a replica of it.
Close.
I just bought an 86. Actually got delivered this morning. An 1986 560 SL Mercedes. I actually think it's gonna be an amazing collector car, but
that's cool.
It just was a car that I thought was like really successful. People drove that car, and I looked up to certain guys in the town that were like most successful. And my grandmother had one. There's so many cars. I mean, do I want an RX-7? Not really. But like my college roommate, one of them had an RX-7, one of them had a Mitsubishi 3000 GT. Those are cool cars. They're not stupid expensive. So you can get a car for 30 grand. That's really cool. Unfortunately, in the 80s, there weren't a lot of other things that maybe Porsches.
Yeah, my generation's looking more of those, not the 90s. Yeah. There's some really cool cars that came through the 90s and the early 2000s. Really. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, again, the
motivators.
The other thing is you can literally, you don't have to spend millions of dollars to have something cool. And that's the thing about the hobby. Like, there's guys that have $2,000 cars that is their pride and joy, and they love it.
Yeah, 100%.
So
it's, everyone's got their own thing, right? So you mentioned a little earlier, you had some things about trust and building a good culture. As you do this, right? What are some of your core beliefs or values that sort of you live by when it comes to just life in general? I mean, you have a family, you got the business, you're managing sort of both of those things, right? It's, you work a lot intentionally in a lot of areas. Like, how are you, I hate the word balance, so I'm not gonna use that, but like, how are you going through that?
Zero balance.
Like fully integrated, right? Yeah. What are some of your values and beliefs around all that?
And I think it's, again, team is one thing, but it's, you only get team through trust. Honesty, integrity is all you got. If your integrity comes into question, you'll never get the deal done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've learned a lot in the last 4 years here in this construction project. Florida, I'm so sick of hearing people say, for bad workmanship, oh, it's just Florida. I'm like, there's got to be someone with integrity in Florida.
Yeah.
But bad integrity follows you forever. People think I can declare bankruptcy, start a new business, and you probably get lots of clients for some time until the one person you run into and like, oh, that guy's the worst.
Yeah.
So your word is your bond, and integrity. Even though I'm a lawyer, I've been burned numerous times. So I wish I could live by handshakes like I used to.
Yeah.
But I still want to have a handshake deal with people. I don't want to have to paper things up and have to worry about every contingency. And unfortunately, that you have to in many cases of because there's too many people out there to take you and get you.
Yeah.
So I mean, integrity, work ethic, accountability, family. I'm very, family, or even though my team works very hard, I always say, like, I never want to hear you come in and say, oh, I missed my kid's baseball game because of blah, blah, blah. That's a scheduling issue. Like if you don't have a good team and you can't go to your colleague and say, hey, I want to go to my kid's baseball game. Like I also tell my team every day, we're not curing cancer here. So don't take it too seriously where you're going to sacrifice your family stuff. Very hard and easy for me to say, and very hard for oftentimes teams to manage when you have a limited team. But you gotta have, that focus of what's important in life, and family is the most important thing because they're the only ones that can have your back.
Sure.
I tell my kids all the time, there's only one person you can count on, and it's you. And the second people you can count is your family, and you probably don't like half of them, but hopefully some of them will be there when you need them.
Yeah.
And then your friends, same thing. Like I have a million acquaintances,
right.
But I can only count on a couple hands who I know will be there in a time of need.
Right. Call them at
Yeah.
midnight when
Yeah.
shit's falling around you.
But honestly, it's just, for me, it's integrity and trust and
Yeah.
work ethic. If you're, if you start an interview, I interview a ton of people for, we're trying to hire a bunch of people, and it's amazing how many people start the interview with, "What's your PTO policy?" Question number one, "How much time do I get off?" And I'm like, this is the worst way you could ever start an
Yeah,
interview.
it's like,
You're starting with
that's
how
not
much
the issue.
It's like,
Well, you'll be fine there,
Yeah.
but what about the rest?
yeah, like, your focus is how much you're not going to work. Why
Yeah.
are you applying for a job?
Yeah.
So
It's like, it's unlimited. You're not hired.
yeah, exactly. It's true. I'm a stickler for details. Like, and I
That's the attorney in you.
Well, it's just like the interview is you're appearing in the Super Bowl. If you have a typo on your resume, like if I have a typo on a resume, I throw it out. It could be the greatest candidate in the world. You're done. If you have it, listen, I make mistakes every day, but an interview, if you haven't sent that interview to a resume to 3 friends to look at it,
Yeah,
you should not be.
especially if you really care about that role, right? It's like, yeah.
Some great. I've kept a folder of some great resumes with some unbelievable typos, unbelievable word misuses. And it's like I always say, Super Bowl. You just showed up Super Bowl and you're sidelined because you didn't have your uniform on. You forgot your helmet.
Yeah.
And then I also make people do work before they're hired.
I love it.
If they're not willing to do a little work, literally tell me, put together a little PowerPoint of something.
Yeah.
It might not even relate to the job. Like,
I've learned to do that with people that I've interviewed, and we did that where I was in a tech sales role and hiring salespeople. We're like, all right, everyone, if salespeople are great salespeople to sell you on the ride, they're good at the role. Then they're not really always great at what they're supposed to do. I'm like, all right,
I've run
make a phone call,
organizations.
make a phone call, or with hiring admin staff, I'm like, all right, here's a situation. There's a fire. Like, write an email for me addressing these issues and how you'd be handling if I wasn't around, right? It's like, what are you going to say? Like, type it up. I want to see how they type, their communication skills. I'm like, before we even get down the road here.
Yeah.
I know other organizations that do the same thing. It's like, here's a phone list, call, and we'll listen, and we'll see.
Yeah.
It's like, this is your tryout. It's like walking on a team.
If you're not
run the routes.
If you're not willing to put that work in before you got the job, you're not going to be
show me your lap times, right?
Yeah.
Really cool. So what for you, as you've done all these things, right? Obviously you're building a culture there. I mean, out in general, what are some of like the biggest challenges? Whether it's something you face throughout all this or something you're working on now that like is a continual thing that you have to continue to work on to be better. What are some of the things that are like the biggest challenges for you?
I think, you said a balance for sure is a big challenge. Not letting perfection get in the way of, good, or I don't know what that saying is. I'm a perfectionist, but at some point, it's like analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
I'm not that type, but I'm a perfectionist to the point where I put myself I am the customer, so I know what my customers want, and the level of detail I expect, sometimes is not reasonable. Like, so there's something, there's a thing to when people build a luxury home, and it's, $10 million, but I can get a house that's $4 million that probably looks the same. And the difference between that and the $10 million is the quality and the details and the attention and the project management and the,
like the hinges in the door.
Yeah.
It's like the little things. Yeah.
And, and large scale projects, you can try to be a perfectionist, but it's not really practical you can't get to the finish line if you're going to spend, it's like, you can't over analyze everything. I mean, you can strive for quality always, but at some point, the blades of grass in the right direction is probably not the good.
Sure.
When you're telling landscapers to turn the pieces of grass sideways because you don't like the way the grass is laying. These are the kind of things going through my head. There's an amazing book I've been talking about lately a lot. A friend of mine in Tampa referred me to it, called Unreasonable Hospitality.
Okay.
I mean, this is the best book you can read about running any business. And this is about the restaurant 11 Madison Park in New York and how they became the number 1 restaurant in the world, and the things they employ are all things I've been applying. Many things I've been applying for many years, but really it takes it to the next level of. There's so many things that you can do, that no one will ever know about, that creates this environment, and all these elements of surprise and delight with your customers. I've always had the philosophy, I'm not looking for the short dollar. we charge for plenty of things, and people joke with me like we charge for everything at the Enclave, but they are not going to recognize all the things you just say fine,
you don't, right?
because I'm not going to nickel and dime people. And people, appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, obviously people look at you now like, all right, things are going great. Got this great business. You've done a lot. Success doesn't come without struggle. For you, what were some like going through and to getting where you are now? What was like your biggest struggle that you had to face? And like if someone's going through something similar, they're like, oh, okay, like there is a light at the end of the tunnel here. What are what's for you? What was that like sort of one thing? It's like, wow, that was like really hard for me.
I would say do your diligence on partners.
Yeah.
You know, I had a very tough experience with a prior partner. I won't specify exactly which thing it was. I was going to say that some people are not, don't have good intentions. And sometimes you want to believe everything you hear. Sometimes when you're especially an entrepreneur, you wishing and praying that the outcome would happen. So I wouldn't say it's desperation, but you will misread things
Yeah.
just to get something done.
You're creating excess optimism around things.
Yeah. I mean, and you will compromise on the level of diligence you would do for something so critical when I'm going to go research dishwashers for a month before I buy a dishwasher, but I'm about to take a partner in my business and I'm going to make a couple phone calls and say, what do you think of this guy? You really should, even if you're like, the deal won't happen with something.
Yeah.
I've learned to really do my diligence. And I think I would say I'm a good judge of character, but I'm a too trusting of an individual.
Sure.
So unfortunately, like I said, I wish I could continue to shake people's hands and trust them, but
Yeah.
now I have a level of skepticism in everything I do. Is this person, is it Jekyll and Hyde, or is it really a good person? In the end, most people I deal with are good people, but
you never know.
Once you get burned to the level I got burned, which by the way, that situation turned into a blessing in disguise because I wouldn't be in Tampa. I wouldn't have the Enclave if it wasn't for
Here we are.
a situation like that. But that's sort of across the board is, you got to work around good people.
Yeah.
And I would just say you got to really learn to do diligence.
Yeah.
Well,
I was just at a conference last week and Arnold Schwarzenegger was there talking. And one of the things he said, and there's a good clip of it online, but he's like, listen, there's no success without failure. You're going to fail. Everyone fails. It's the losers who don't get up, right? Winners get up and they get up and they get up and they get up, right? And because you got up and you figured it out, here we are, right? With this awesome thing you're working on and you're going to make impact again.
Every day. This last 3 years have been the biggest challenge of my life. And it should have been like, I came into it going, I did Michigan. This is going to be easy. I would say I used Michigan as the work out the kinks. I mean, every single day is the biggest challenge. I mean, the last 3 days have been the biggest challenge. It's like when you think you're done, it's not done.
Yeah.
And each day it's a new, literally yesterday, there's a pipe collapsed under the ground.
Oh God.
And the water's backing up and they're like, it's 68 grand.
Oh no.
It's a brand new pipe, brand new asphalt. How did this not get discovered? Oh, I don't know. Somebody must have drove over it. It's like,
yeah, it's always something.
And it used to be in business, I had, $20 surprise. $68,000 is like, that's just like burning money up. And I always say, like, I'd much rather throw the money out the car on the freeway. It'd be more entertaining.
Yeah.
But to pay $68,000 for a pipe under the ground, nobody's ever going to notice.
Yeah.
That's every day.
Man.
So that's challenging.
That's tough. So obviously you got your family and you have the business. Outside of the time you spend there, any other hobbies or things you're doing? I mean, you love cars, obviously, and I know you have a specific love for, I think, lowriders, right? Tell us about like what you're doing outside of that, or is it all sort of integrated with the?
It's all integrated, and that's the beauty about the world I built for myself is that I can work all the time, and it is my sort of personal life and business. I love entertaining people, so I built, not just the Enclave as a platform to be able to hang out with great people. Obviously I've got to work still. Some people mistake that and they want to I always tell a story like in M1, I'm like, I work out of my garage and every day, like 5 people come in, hey, you want a Moscow Mule? I'm like, it's 1 p.m. dude. Like I'm working. Oh, sorry. Cause it's their playground. And for me, I still got to work.
Yeah.
But it's sort of the extension of the business. Like we do these trips, we take people to Italy every year. We just did the Tail of the Dragon trip in
Yeah, those are
Tennessee.
beautiful. I saw photos from
Those
both
are
of
like really the best part of my business is I get to be with great people. I get to experience things that I'm driving cars and traveling and, doing stuff. So
Yeah.
it's amazing. I'm trying to be more intentional about, sort of vacations outside of that. So that's my long-term goal. I'm not successful at it yet, but I like to get to the point where I can like take some real purposeful time off, and disconnect. I've never really done that. I talk about it all the time. But yeah, I mean, listen, I want to become a boater, so I've been trying. I bought a boat years ago, still hasn't showed
Just
up.
like expenses.
Yeah. Yeah. But I love living on the water,
Yeah.
in
And
Tampa.
you're here,
and
right?
Yeah.
You got to take advantage of it.
So who knows? I mean, in the end, I'll probably just hang out the enclave.
What was the April Fool's post? The boaters on the yacht enclave, I think I saw.
That was April Fool's, but it might become a reality because there's so much interest in that. There's more interest in that than
wait, for real?
I'm still getting calls
Take my
every
money.
day.
Take
Yeah.
my money.
I'm still getting calls every day.
It was a joke, but now
It was a total joke. And literally, I had 50 people call me saying, "Can I buy a unit? Can I invest?" And I'm like, so now I'm thinking it might be a good idea. I've actually been working on it a little bit, but then I'm thinking that might be 10 times harder than building a racetrack.
I can only imagine on the water, the land costs.
Yeah.
Man.
So
what a situation. One thing that I like to ask, and for me it's important, and is legacy, right? Like, you're doing something pretty cool. You have helped create thriving communities. You're building a thriving community. You've also mentioned your kids and also kids that you've helped in the community, right? So what does like legacy mean to you when you think about, where you're at and what you're building? What are some of the things that matter to you when it comes to that?
The beauty of what I've discovered, and this is what drives me the most, is when I get to work and I drive around the enclave and I look that I built something that will last for many, many, many years. I always say maybe even 100 years it won't be this. It might be a military bunker storage. I don't know. But as a developer, what you're building something that could last 100 years more, and maybe it'll stay the same thing. And I've had people say to me, um, Bob Lutz, who's former CEO of Chrysler and other companies, he said, what you built, he was talking about M1. He said, this is like the modern dude ranch. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, horses were relegated to dude ranches and cars are going to be relegated to private driving facilities. When the world becomes autonomous, this will be the only place you can actually drive. And I'm thinking that, I don't think it's going to happen during our lifetime, but if you think about that,
eventually.
yeah.
Like Minority Report or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So, that, and also just being an example to my kids. I mean, I'm not, I wish my kids would work in my business. My son worked for me in Michigan as a summer intern, and I think after he sat in the guard shack for 4 months, I think he wasn't really inclined to like do that again.
Oh, nice role.
So they're pursuing their own, opportunities, and they're doing great. And
that's good.
Hopefully, I know the one thing that they definitely don't want to work as hard as I work, and I hope they, in the fashion I do, I hope they're sort of work smarter. I'm just grind it out and day in and day out.
Those are good values to instill, right?
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. I've got other friends that are way more successful than me, and I'm like, they're still home every day at 5 o'clock with their families. And I'm like, I don't know I haven't been able to figure that methodology out.
It's tough. I mean, it's tough. Like I have 3 kids and want to be home with them, and certain nights I'm like, all right, intentionally there. And I think what I talked about in some of their conversations was just all in when you're there, all in when you're there. It's like it's hard to balance. If you want to really
definitely many regrets over the years
legacy.
Of missing a lot of things and trying to make up for it now with trying to be more present. I'm not the most present, but I try and focus on doing as many things as possible with family. And whether I'm on my phone the whole time, I still strive to like spend quality time, in nuggets.
Yeah. So as a developer in the area, what are your thoughts on Florida, Tampa Bay, or even other parts of the country? Like, what's your sentiment about where things are at and headed, and based on what you're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I chose Tampa based on data. I'd never been to Tampa ever, a computer program. Basically, chose 20 cities in the U.S. and then I started working those cities to see what could I get done. What's the development climate like? What's the growth like? What's the cost of doing business? Very fortunate to get introduced to this property that the enclave is on now, and pre-COVID. So,
Yeah, what a great
people
location.
think it's like genius strategy, but Tampa Bay was what my data showed me. It wasn't anything about location, and you can't to get that much property today. It's impossible. The economics wouldn't work out. And it was a dead piece of land that nobody wanted. And because I spent years working it, now it's got a tremendous value. But it's a phenomenal location. The problem is it had no utilities. It was bad soils. It was between an airport and a freeway, which is perfect for me, but bad for any other development. So, I mean, in general, I think Florida, obviously it's growth. Everyone wants to live in Florida. Everyone wants to live in tax-free climate, even though it's really not tax-free. There's no income tax, but you pay many other ways, right? I always say, like, you might be saving 12% income tax moving from New York, but you're going to pay, if you own a business, you're going to pay more than that for all the bureaucracy that we have in Florida. But I think there's, right now, a good political climate. I think they're, generally pro-development. I think they're good policies. I think there's tremendous infrastructure challenges that, every city in America that's growing faces. I think you got significant weather, issues that everyone keeps their, digs their head in the sand thinking it's prey. Well, the hurricane's never gonna hit Tampa. It's never hit us so far. So it's an Indian lore that's never gonna come. Trust me, it's coming at some point. 2 years in a row on building something, it was happening. Luckily it missed us. But I, in particular, Tampa, I don't know much about Sarasota, but if you look at Tampa compared to like East Coast of Florida, Miami, Lauderdale, Boca, Delray, those have been overdeveloped. I mean, literally, if you can find a piece of property there, it's impossible. Tampa Bay, nothing's even happened yet. The local Tampa people are like, "Oh my God, there's a 5-star hotel, the Edition Hotel. We've now met our, we're the pinnacle of overgrowth." So I'm like,
hardly.
If you you look back in 10 years from now at Bayshore Boulevard, and you will think it looks like Miami. And right now, there's like 3 skyscrapers or 3 tall buildings. Right. You got the Ritz, and you got this. That whole street's going to be, there's so much opportunity. If I had time and extra money, I'd buy everything I could in real estate in Tampa. In single family lots, the lots are $500,000, and any house that gets built can sell for $2 million. And everything that, sort of West Tampa and the whole, nothing's happened yet. Like, there's still old school neighborhoods ripe for development. There's, amazing new developments happening in commercial and retail. And there's so many different areas. Tampa is like the center of the universe for, an hour to Sarasota, an hour to Orlando, an hour to Clearwater, an hour. I mean, where can you, in Enclave, we're literally at the crossroads of all those places. So, and I mean, I've been here for 4 years, and every time I take a drive, it's like, I didn't even know that. I never even heard of Tarpon Springs. I never even been to Paso Grill. I've never been to Sarasota. And there's entire worlds of things to do and see. And then culturally, it's very Midwest values here. A lot of people came down I-75 from the Midwest. And it's a little different than coming down I-95 from the East Coast. So you definitely get more laid back, people that are a lot more friendly, and there's a lot less sort of posers.
No, it's a lot. I mean, I was with Miami for 5 years, and there's a lot of good culture there, and Latin American influence, and great food and all that. But it is a bit hectic, and people aren't very nice all the time. And it's crazy. I watched through the 2000s, early 2000s, in the recession, where you didn't think there was room for building, they built. So as you look at Tampa, you're like, okay, it's nowhere near as dense, and there's plenty of opportunity. And there are some older neighborhoods, and things need to be redone, and so much beautiful space and land. So it only makes sense that this will be.
But I mean,
continue.
Every time I look at the restaurant scene in Tampa Bay, like there was 3 years ago, there were barely any restaurants. Now you got unbelievable world-class restaurants opening up. You got outdoor mall. You look at Midtown. You look at Armature Works. You look at West Shore. West Shore is going to explode, I believe. Water Street. It's just, and these are just, the reason nothing's happened is that all those projects are brute force developers, just like me. If most people are not willing to go through the brain damage it takes to do these projects, because the reason Tampa's not developed is that the government they're not overtly anti-development. They're just systematically anti-development because their processes and the procedures and their form of government with county commissioners that are sort of not truly connected to the staff that actually do all the work. It's a slow moving machine. So unless you are willing to literally slog it out over years, like I have, you can't just buy a piece of land and build what you want. It's every form of resistance, which you'd think they would be rolling the red carpet out. And I would say, like, they don't have red carpet to roll out. So not that they don't want to, there's no processes and no, you got Economic Development Commission. That's great. And they want to help, but there's no strategic economic development happening. I can't wait to the day when, a multinational company wants to move to Tampa and bring, do what's happened in Columbus, Ohio, and do what's happened in Chicago, where you're taking a company, go to New York and say, we're going to move 10,000 people from X, Y, and Z company to Tampa Bay and build a campus headquarters. I mean, it would be unbelievable, transformational. So I think it's ground floor opportunity in Tampa. And unbelievable.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question, and what are I guess, have you had mentors through everything, through things you've done, and how have they helped you? Who are they? And I often find sometimes you're like, oh, I know a lot now. It's like, no, but you get a mentor, you're like, no, I don't know anything. I still have a lot to learn. What's been your experience working with people, more senior to you or mentors in life? And
I mean, I got numerous mentors through every career I've had and sort of stage in life. I had mentors as camp counselors growing up. I went to summer camp for many years in Northern Michigan. Some of them not the best mentors, but mentors nonetheless. Then in school, I had a couple college professors that were pseudo mentors, more inspirational and just different thinking. In LA, I had a mentor, a guy named Stephen Lowy, who was an entertainment lawyer who really took me under his wing and taught me a lot about business and integrity and work ethic and things like that. When you're the junior guy and a lot of places you'll be stuck in an office and just have to figure it out. But he was really a mentor and still a friend. I don't see him that often or talk to him that often, but great guy who taught me a lot. Then coming back to Michigan, certain people in the business community became mentors, my business partners. One of them was a significant mentor, even though she was my so-called partner. And then I've had customers, that have become good friends and mentors. There's one particular guy in Michigan who was a garage owner, became an investor, and became a sort of advisor mentor to me in development because he's a very successful real estate developer. So I think that's key. I always tell people, like, mentorship is the best thing you can give somebody, as well as the best thing you can take from somebody.
100%.
And also, it goes along with network building. Like that's the most important thing. And if and I tell people there's only one thing that matters in business is your network.
Yeah.
And then you look at what drives a network. That's integrity, that's trust, that's grind, that's work ethic, all the things I talked about. But you have to nurture that network.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just collect cards. People give me their cards all the time, and you have to have a system, which, again, I learned from some of my mentors, like you have to continually build, I don't know how many thousands of LinkedIn's I have. I don't know how, I used to have a Rolodex. I used to have a BlackBerry, with tens of thousands of contacts. And, not that I know every single one of them by heart, but if you take notes and if you, you see, I for years, I see an article and I'll send it to somebody because I remember like I met some guy and he told me he was into offshore powerboat racing. It's like, then I see something about it and you ping them, constantly just pinging and sending. And the beauty about it nowadays is like, you can literally do it in 3 seconds on your phone.
So easy.
You can search everything, you can find everything.
So much information.
So
ability to stay connected is like better than ever. And
it
sounds like you were always been open to learning from somebody else. And I think, what was it? John Maxwell said, you weren't an asshole asking for help, but then like not following through on like with the recommendations. And like, like I took all this information in from everyone and everywhere and then applied it to life. Right. And that's awesome.
Yeah. So the network is everything. And that's the culmination of, 30 something years. But I can go anywhere in the world and drop on the network, literally.
That's awesome.
So it's awesome.
Well, I appreciate you coming in, Brad. It was awesome having you in the studio. And
pleasure. Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you for having me.